After playing 90 minutes in Liverpool's Carabao Cup fixture, is Mo Salah now a rotation risk going into game week 11? I'm going to discuss exactly that alongside all of the other hot topics going into game week 11 in this video. So as always, if you can, drop a like and of course smash that subscribe button if you are enjoying it. It'll be massively appreciated. Without further ado, let's get into today's video. So in preparation for game week 11, I thought this would be a good opportunity to review some things that happened in game week 10, which are definitely worth noting going into this weekend. So first up, Szoboszlai picked up 2 FPL assists, 4 attempted assists, and a 0.96 expected assist. I know there's a lot of assists there, but what I'm trying to say is that he's starting to become an actual FPL option for our teams. Now, I'm not telling you guys to necessarily jump in on Szoboszlai right now in that Liverpool team, but he's played 90 minutes in every single fixture, so he's definitely rotation proof. And as I mentioned, with these underlying numbers, while he's not necessarily the goal threat in the team, he's basically become what we saw from Trent Alexander-Arnold over the last 3 or 4 years. He's picking up those areas that we're used to seeing Trent in. And if he continues with these numbers, yes, the price tag right now isn't necessarily the most appealing because we have cheaper alternatives in the likes of Mitoma and Mbeumo, to name a few. I still think if he does continue putting up these numbers, we need to consider him with the run that Liverpool have coming up. But again, it might be a bit of a niche pick for those that are looking for a Liverpool midfielder. But one to keep on your radar. I think he's going to tick over really nicely over the next month or two. Number 2, Wilson top for expected goals at 2.11. This is always the case with Callum Wilson. Whenever he plays consistently for Newcastle, he is up there with the best in terms of expected goals. And Haaland was second on 2.01. Big question we need to ask ourselves is, Callum Wilson an option for our teams? We know Alexander Isak could be out until after the international break, so he definitely is a transfer that we could consider, but the Newcastle fixtures aren't necessarily the best, so the ceiling for him doesn't necessarily feel as good as the other forwards available in the game right now, like a Darwin Núñez or an Ollie Watkins. So although Wilson is ticking over amazingly and the team as a whole is, difficult to justify buying him going into game week 11. Number 3, Gabriel and Odegaard benched in game week 10, which is a nightmare for those that wildcarded in Gabriel. We don't know right now whether that was because a rotation for minutes to give them preparation for future Premier League games, or it was an actual tactical reason. For me, I feel like Odegaard is definitely going to come back into that Arsenal team. The big question mark is Gabriel. I think he does, especially with a tricky game away against Newcastle, but it's a game week 12 fixture at home against Burnley, which we want Gabriel. And if we're going to see him actually a rotation risk in those easier games where we want the clean sheets, he is one to risk maybe selling later down the line. But I'd rather recommend having Gabriel for game week 11 and then reassessing in game week 12. Number 4, Nketiah bagged a hat-trick in the absence of Gabriel Jesus. Amazing for those that jumped on him. Is he a consideration for FPL teams? Potentially, and I will discuss that later on in this video. But as long as Gabriel Jesus has been ruled out, and it sounds like it could be for a few more weeks, Nketiah is always an option at 5.5 million. Number 5, Mbeumo bagging back-to-back double-digit hauls. I was one of those that sold him in my game week 10 wildcard, and he's come to bite us in the bum. Yes, one of the goals was a little bit fortuitous with the goalkeeper coming up from a corner, but it still doesn't take away from the fact that Mbeumo plays 90 minutes on penalties, and the Brentford fixtures, while good for game week 11, tricky for 12 and 13. Beyond that, amazing. I think we all will come back on Mbeumo, but I don't necessarily think he is a desperate transfer for this week with the next 3 that they have. Number 6, Botman ruled out for the longer term. We know Eddie Howe lies in every single press conference, but it looks like we have had a bit of clarity that Botman's injury is going to take a bit of time to recover from. So Lascelles at 4 million, maybe an opportunity to invest in the Newcastle team, but if you own Botman regardless, selling him is the right option. Number 7, another injury is Neto limping off with a hamstring injury. That looks like it could be longer term. Maybe not months, but definitely a numerous amount of weeks. Neto's been in great form. Selling him is the right option. I will cover off a few opportunities that you could go to later on in this video at that mid-budget price options. And number 8, Douglas Luiz ticking over at 5.6 million with his 6th attacking return of the season. 90 minutes on penalties, on set pieces. The only problem with him, underlying numbers aren't amazing, but with the fixtures they have coming up, he could continue to tick over, and he will be discussed later on in this video. But those are the 8 things that you missed maybe going into game week 11. Let's crack on with the rest of the video. So as mentioned at the start of the video, we need to talk about those minutes played by players in the Carabao Cup midweek. And one of those was Mo Salah. Now, I don't want to be the one to tell you this, but there is a chance that we could see some rotation on the weekend. Now, I'm not sitting here spreading rumours saying that it's definitely going to happen. But what I've done here is I've put up the minutes of players in the significant teams and obviously FPL options that we actually own. I'm not going to talk about those little players that nobody owns, like Joe Gomez, for example. So Liverpool here, Tsimikas and Mo Salah played the full 90 minutes in their away fixture against Bournemouth. Now, one would argue that they're just players that can't be taken out of this Liverpool team because they're so important. The other narrative is going to be that the game away against Luton in game week 11 is so easy that Klopp doesn't need them for that game, so he decided to play them for the full 90 minutes midweek. You've got to create your own narrative in this situation because there is no concrete answer unless we do get information in the press conference. But I don't think it's good news because you can see here, Darwin Núñez came off the bench and played 30 minutes and obviously bagged a goal. That doesn't impact Mo Salah necessarily. Jota came on for the last 10 minutes. You would expect Jota to be starting in game week 11 with that limited game time. Obviously, we don't know the situation on Luis Diaz right now. Really sad news in regards to his family. So we're not expecting him to participate this weekend. But Gakpo started for Liverpool, then came off a little bit earlier. So it's very, very difficult to understand what is going to happen with this Liverpool team for their realistically easy game away against Luton. But I don't think it's good that Mo Salah and Tsimikas played the full 90 minutes. And based on that, you do not sell Mo Salah or Tsimikas going into game week 11. You simply start them in your teams. But I think the captaincy now needs to be moved away from Mo Salah just because of that potential rotation risk that could happen. He might come on for the last 30, he might start. But because of that slight worry, I think probably not captain him is the right option, but you're obviously going to keep him. Some other considerations, Chelsea, Reece James returned to the team alongside Badiashile, started, played 60 minutes each. Malagusto owners, you might be a little bit risky now going forward because I think Reece James will retain that right back spot longer term. Badiashile, we need to remember, was fantastic in a Chelsea shirt prior to his injury. I think Lever Colwill is still a locked-in spot, but I think there's more rotation risk later down the line. So interested to see what Pochettino will do, also with the likes of Thiago Silva and Disasi as centre-back options. And Cole Palmer playing 87 minutes as well. Obviously, they have quite a tricky fixture this weekend against Spurs, but I don't know if it's good or bad that Palmer played 87. Probably good because he has been a very influential player for Chelsea and their options that they can rotate him with don't really exist right now. And Raheem Sterling playing the full 90 as well. Again, create your own narrative on those ones. Moving into some other teams that we have FPL investment in, Arsenal. Gabriel played the full 90 minutes. I really don't know what to read into this right now. Gabriel was obviously benched, unused in game week 10. Plays full 90 midweek. Now they're away against Newcastle. I think the situation right now with Gabriel is very clear. You don't sell him and you probably don't even start him in game week 11 if you have a strong enough bench. And then we just reassess when we get to game week 12 with that home fixture against Burnley. I think that's probably the best thing to do right now, but I'm a little bit worried about Gabriel. It is worth noting. Nketiah played 80 minutes, which is quite surprising. Maybe because of the Gabriel Jesus injury, Arteta wants to get Nketiah fully up to speed once again. Regardless, we're going to discuss Nketiah in a little bit more detail in a minute. So good news for those that own Saka, Martinelli. They were second half subs coming on for about 30, 25 minutes. So that's good news for their game time going into game week 11. And Saliba, an unused sub. Good news. I expect that was just the opportunity for them to rest him in preparation for that difficult away game against Newcastle. West Ham, Bowen played the full 90. Again, create your own narrative. He could be benched for their weekend fixture, but he is such a talisman for them. So again, make that what you will. And Areola, an unused sub. Don't think that's a problem there. I just think they were giving Fabianski a cup run. Areola, I think, is going to be naturally the Premier League goalie. Last up, a few other teams to note. Everton's Calvert-Lewin plays 65 minutes. They are a better team with him in it. And as long as he stays fit, he is always an FPL option. But right now, if you have Haaland, if you have Watkins, there's no way you're able to squeeze Calvert-Lewin into your teams. But it is worth monitoring his fitness. Newcastle, Trippier and Burn came on for the last 15 minutes. It's worth noting, Livramento and Lewis Hall looked fantastic in that Newcastle game, even though they were against Man United. But I think Trippier and Burn are too important to that Newcastle team. But it's a good thing Newcastle remaining in the Cup. I think Eddie Howe probably looks at it as an opportunity to think to himself, Livermore, Hawk, and get those minutes in the Carabao and FA Cup, meaning Trippier and Burn could be basically rested for the Premier League and Champions League involvement. So no worries about those two, I don't think. And Wilson playing 25 minutes at the end. Again, he is going to be definitely starting in game week 11 due to the Alexander Isak injury. Gordon plays 65 minutes. Again, with the injuries they have to Harvey Barnes, I think he's definitely going to be locked in for a game week 11 involvement. So no worries there necessarily. Man United, how awful are you guys? Haaland, Rashford and Bruno came on for the last 25 minutes, not like they've done anything. If you own Man United, it's very difficult to sell them right now because of the fixtures that they have, Fulham and Luton, but you ain't buying them right now at all. So as I mentioned, I wanted to touch on Eddie Nketiah and whether he is actually an FPL option for our teams from game week 11 onwards. Now, it's worth noting, the recent press conferences from Arteta have suggested that Gabriel Jesus could be out for a few weeks, and there are other reports that he could be out for up to a month, maybe a month and a half. So we don't actually have any concrete evidence right now what the situation is with Gabriel Jesus. However, what we do know is that once Gabriel Jesus is out, Nketiah is definitely an FPL option for our teams. Now, I think there's a few chats about could Nketiah potentially be dropped for Kai Havertz as a number 9. That could happen, but with Nketiah right now, I just think he is the natural replacement for Gabriel Jesus. Does very different things, and I don't think that's necessarily a good thing for the likes of Saka and Martinelli. Whereas Jesus will come into the half spaces, come in as a false 9 similar to Kai Havertz, meaning that Martinelli can stretch the game. Nketiah's main point is actually being the focal point in terms of stretching the game, being in between the posts. So I don't think it's actually a good thing for Martinelli and Saka, but the one we need to talk about is whether we need to buy him. So looking at the underlying numbers, you can see they're decent. XG 0.5 per 90. His expected assists is literally 0, but as I always say, that is a good thing for forwards because it means everything is funneling through that striker. And at the end of the day, you want the goal scorer in any team. The big thing about it right now is I don't think buying Nketiah for game week 11 is actually the right move. I would much rather you, with maybe the anticipation that you wildcarded in game week 10 or your squad's looking quite strong right now, I'd rather you roll your free transfer in game week 11, arrive at game week 12. We might have a bit more information about Gabriel Jesus, whether he is actually long-term out. And if that is the case, then you have the luxury of 2 free transfers. And the reason I say that is if you want to squeeze Nketiah into your team, you ain't selling Haaland and you ain't selling Ollie Watkins because the fixtures are too good. So you're likely going to have to restructure your team. And that might mean downgrading a 5th midfielder to a cheap enabler for you to then upgrade your 3rd forward. Or if you're in a position right now where you already have a 3-4-3 formation, I think acquiring Nketiah is going to be a little bit easier for you guys. But generally speaking, I know a lot of managers have 3-5-2. So having 2 free transfers in game week 12 to maybe change the structure of a team is going to be really, really important. So that's my kind of conclusion right now in Nketiah. He isn't a buy for game week 11, but if Jesus is ruled out, Burnley, Brentford, Wolves, Luton, that's very difficult not to own Nketiah. So I'd rather have the luxury of 2 free transfers to change my structure of my team. But let me know your thoughts in the comments. Next up, I want to discuss those budget midfielders in the game because there are some that are ticking over really, really nicely right now for FPL returns. It's also worth noting with the Neto injury, he's around 5.8 million. You might be in the market for a replacement. So hopefully I'm going to cover off the 4 best alternatives at 5.8 million or less. Of course, if you have a bit more money in the bank, I probably would recommend maybe looking to buy Mitoma or Mbeumo. Those would be my 2 top picks right now. Brighton's fixtures are fantastic. Brentford's not so much over the next 3, but you know you're buying a 90-minute man and a man who is on penalties, which cannot be overlooked. But these are the 4 budget midfielders that I want to discuss. Cole Palmer of Chelsea, Hwang of Wolves, who's actually He-Chan on this underlying stats here, Douglas Luiz of Aston Villa, and Adingra of Brighton. Now, I've basically put the underlying stats here based on expected FPL points per 90 from top to bottom, and you can see Cole Palmer is leading the way. First and foremost, I want to address the expected goals column. You can see Cole Palmer at 0.54, but Palmer and Douglas Luiz are penalty takers for their respective teams. Now, that is a definite benefit when you buy these players because if they get a penalty, even if they play bad, they can get FPL points, whereas Hwang or Adingra don't necessarily have that luxury in their teams. But I might need some people in the comments to tell me whether Hwang is actually the Wolves penalty taker or not. Please do let me know. So Being a penalty taker is a really good thing. However, I always also want to look at the open play XG, the non-pen XG, to see whether these players take away their penalties if they're actually good FPL value. Now, Palmer's, you can see on the far column, falls from 0.54 per 90 to 0.21 XG per 90. So still decent reading, but obviously not as good as what the XG is with penalties. But the big fall off, which I'm a little bit worried about, is Douglas Luiz. So his XG per 90, which includes penalties, is 0.31 per 90. But without penalties, non-pen, 0.07. And his expected assists is 0.09. So I'm a little bit worried about Douglas Luiz. He's very, very reliant on either a worldie from 30 yards or a penalty in order to get his FPL returns. Now, it's worth noting, Douglas Luiz is on penalties, set pieces, corners, plays 90 minutes, and you can see with the fixtures here, Forest, Fulham, Spurs, Bournemouth, really good for fixtures coming up. So I'm not knocking anybody going for Douglas Luiz at 5.6. However, I wouldn't have him as my top pick. Based on underlying numbers, I do think that Cole Palmer is still the man to buy, but I do get it. The fixtures aren't great. Spurs, Man City, Newcastle, Brighton, Man United, even Everton away looks like a tricky fixture from a defensive perspective. So Palmer, I think, is the best enabler at 5 million. I'd pick him over Adingra just because I do not know whether Adingra is going to play consistently over this game time. If you were to tell me he was playing 90 minutes, Everton, Sheffield United, Forest, really, really good fixtures, but I just don't think there's any clarification right now whether he is going to play consistently over this minute. So the big thing right now is maybe Hwang of Wolves is the route to go for. The fixtures are okay. You're going to get the Sheffield United involvement. Spurs at home. Wolves have done well against those big teams, so it's not necessarily a bad fixture. Then Fulham away, then Arsenal away, a little bit more difficult. Then Burnley and Forest, really good long term, and its XG per 90 is fantastic at 0.42. So right now, if I had to kind of rate these, I get it. Douglas Luiz probably is the sexy pick, but I'd actually have Cole Palmer number 1 and Hwang number 2. Adingra would actually jump up to number 1, only if you're sat there thinking that he is definitely going to play the minutes over this period. If you think he is, I actually then would put Adingra as number 1. But personally speaking, I know the De Zerbi rotation. I couldn't confidently sit here right now and say that Adingra is going to play guaranteed minutes. So hopefully that has helped you guys out. Let me know who your top budget pick is in the comments. Now, as always, when you are making FPL transfers, I really think it is worth noting the fixtures that are coming up over the next 4, 5, 6 game weeks. So I've got the fixture ticker here from basically game week 11 up until game week 16. I think that's a really good long-term perspective for us to consider our FPL transfers. So first and foremost, when we are looking at this, I just want you to consider a few things. Between game weeks 12 and 13, we have another international break. So basically it's going to be a week and a half, 2-week period where there's no Premier League football. So please do note that between game weeks 12 and 13. Then in game week 15, we have a Tuesday deadline. 16 is a Saturday deadline. So basically we're going to have international break between 12 and 13. Game week 13 is a Saturday deadline. 14 is a Saturday deadline, but then it's going to be a midweek deadline on 15. So when we're looking at game week 15, that is the time where we could see some rotation in certain teams, because I don't think there are going to be a lot of teams out there that are going to play teams Saturday, Tuesday, Saturday with their players. So there could definitely be rotation. And when we look at it around here, we need to look at maybe somebody like a City, for example. Game week 14, they're at home against Spurs. 15 away against Villa, 16 away against Luton. So the way I'd read that right now is, could we see a situation where they play their big guns against Spurs and then Aston Villa, but then obviously with that third game in a week against Luton away, that could be where we see mass rotation. So I just want to make sure you guys have a little bit of an idea on what the actual schedule is for the teams over this period. It is really worth noting. So in terms of actually investing in a team right now for game week 11, Crystal Palace are top of the table. Attackers, I don't really think there are any options right now with Eze's injury and Elise out as well. But I think the defence is a decent investment in terms of budget. Mark Guy is probably the pick of the bunch at 4.5 million. I think he's really good, and I think his game time is going to be really consistent over this period. So he is a really good investment. And also, as I mentioned, Hwang at Wolves, with those long-term fixtures, I think are really, really good. I think while Neto was out, the only big question is that going to impact Wolves as a team and Hwang as an actual option? Because Neto was actually creating a lot for Hwang in that game. So we don't really know what the impact is going to be there. And you can see Brighton third best for the ticker, but again, we do need to take into account Europa League involvement over this period. And with De Zerbi's rotation, it's just very, very difficult to sit here and confidently invest in an asset. If I had to buy one right now, it probably would be Matoma, because I think of all the attackers, his game time is a bit more locked on than others. But would Matoma get rotated from time to time? Yes, definitely over that period. Also a Stupinan, keep him on your radar, because if he does return to the Brighton team, we know at that left back role, he is quite essential to the way that they do progress with the ball and attack in the final third. And I think he is a bit of a minutes monster as well. So I wouldn't look past a Stupinan once he returns to the Brighton team. But I want to quickly cover off some of the big guns. So Man United, you can see if you own them right now, a very difficult sell because they're away against Fulham, at home against Luton. In another universe, we would be buying Man United assets right now, but you cannot buy any Man United player, even Harry Maguire, unless you need to buy him as an enabler for your FPL teams. But even then, I'd rather you just maybe go down to someone like a Braithwaite at 4 million at Everton, because at least they can defend. So Man United, if you own them, you probably don't sell them right now, but you do not buy them. And longer term, they are not an investment at all. Arsenal, as I said, game week 11 for Nketiah isn't the time to buy, but 12 onwards are brilliant fixtures. So I think we come back to Arsenal in game week 12. City, Bournemouth at home, that is the money fixture it seems. But could I confidently sit here and tell you to maybe sell Ollie Watkins for a Julian Alvarez? Don't think that's the right move. And in terms of midfielders, I don't confidently think there is a midfielder that I would be confident with their minutes. And also with Chelsea and then Liverpool and then Spurs, could this be the fixture that Pep looks at and thinks, this is the game where I need to rest my key defenders, maybe a key defender in preparation for that really, really tough run in. But don't think City need to be invested with that tricky run. Chelsea, Liverpool, Spurs, Villa, I think we can avoid City in terms of a triple up over that period. Liverpool, the big ones. If we can get an investment in a second Liverpool attacker, that is key. I've touched on the Mo Salah and Tsimikas situation. I do think there is a world where they do get benched for that fixture, but I'm not spreading rumours. Then they have Brentford, City, Fulham, Sheffield United. If we could get a piece of Darwin Núñez, it would be incredible. But do you really want to sell Ollie Watkins? He has Nottingham Forest away, followed by Fulham at home. I think Spurs away isn't a bad fixture. Then Bournemouth. Really difficult to move away from Ollie Watkins. I think it would take a very, very brave manager maybe to sell him, because in his toughest fixture away against Spurs, Darwin Núñez is away against City. So I don't really think that's the time. And then are you really going to sell Watkins when he's away against Bournemouth to invest in Darwin Núñez at home against Fulham? I just don't see it. I think Ollie Watkins sticks in our teams right now. Last up, the two at the bottom here. Spurs, tricky run of fixtures, but if you own Son, you don't sell him until we maybe see some rotation. And Chelsea, we just avoid. Cole Palmer, a good enabler, but realistically, he isn't going to be ripping up trees over this period. Okay, to wrap up this Game Week 11 preview video, I thought it would be a good opportunity for me just to quickly touch off on what my team looks like and what I am planning to do. If you want a bit more of a deep dive, make sure you do check out our most recent video where I have done a bit more of a longer term plan for Game Weeks 12 and 13 with my transfers. But I just want to quickly touch off how my team is looking. So this is my bust team. This is my team that if I had to lock it in right now, how it would look. Again, I am a little bit worried about Tsimikas and Mo Salah's game time. So because of that, Mo Salah is definitely not getting the captaincy. I was always going to put it on Erling Haaland, but I would implore those that maybe are looking to put the captaincy on Mo Salah, just have a little bit of a think about whether his minutes could be a risk for that fixture, because it is so good. I get it, Mo Salah, you want to chase those points, but also it's so good, Klopp may feel he could go without Mo Salah. Tsimikas owners, make sure you do have your benching correct. I've got Charlie Taylor as first sub at home against Crystal Palace. If we get close to the deadline and we maybe get an indication that Tsimikas could be rested for that game, I probably would just play Tsimikas or Gabriel, which one I decide, knowing that Tsimikas could come on for the last 10 minutes and that would be an issue for my team. I wouldn't want that situation to happen. But outside of that, the team picks itself. I've discussed Cole Palmer. He actually done okay in game week 10 with his underlying numbers, but do I love him long term? Not really. And do I love the Chelsea team with those fixtures long term? Not really. I personally am hoping that we see a situation where Reece James returns to the Chelsea team long term. We see that overlapping Reece James that we come to love, meaning that Cole Palmer gets even more space to pick up the ball in those little pocket areas and be creative. So I'm hoping we see an evolution from Cole Palmer and this Chelsea team. Fingers crossed, and hopefully if we're getting Nkunku back in 3 or 4 weeks, that could be even better for the creativity of this Chelsea team. But otherwise, team picks itself. The plan is to roll the free transfer, give myself 2 free transfers to basically decide whether I want to shift the structure of my team to a 3-4-3 with the investment in Eddie Nketiah if he looks essential. And if that was to happen, it would require a few downgrades in the team, and that is my only worry. May require a -4 downgrade in a defender to free up the funds to invest in Mbama up into the man Eddie Nketiah. So let me know your thoughts in the comments and let me know what your transfer plans are for Game Week 11. Yes guys, okay, that is going to wrap up today's Game Week 11 preview video. I really hope I've covered off all of the hot topics that you wanted answering, but if I haven't, let me know them in the comment section. As always, I will make sure I answer them between now and the deadline, so do not sweat about it, get in the comments. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. If you can, drop a like, smash that subscribe button, it's massively appreciated, and I will see you in my Game Week 11 team selection video tomorrow. Take care. Cheers.